So I'm just wondering, how do you fundamentally change yourself? And also wondering whether the perspective that you've gained from being outside of Earth has helped you with that.
Thanks, Dina. To go to the core of your question, one of the most dangerous thing you're asked to do as an astronaut is to fly the rocket ship. On my last flight, I was in space for 5 months, but 50% of the risk, half of all of the risk that I was going to face in 5 months off the planet was in the first 9 minutes. It's launch is risky. And on my first space flight back 20 years ago, the odds of death were 1 in 38. Which, if Air Canada, which is the national airline, they would crash 9 airplanes a day if they flew at that rate. So how do you face up to danger in your life? And a lot of us, everybody in this room, has just denied themselves something in life because we're afraid of it. We just basically say, I won't do that because I'm afraid. I won't bungee jump. I won't get married. I won't fly an airplane. I won't, whatever. I'm fearful, and therefore I'm just not going to do that thing. But of course, all of those experiences have a richness that maybe make them worth doing. So how do you change yourself from just hiding behind an amorphous fear to digging into it, to figuring out that this is something worth taking a risk for? We're all going to die eventually anyway. So what things in your life did you decide were worth taking a risk? And to me, I think early on, giving yourself a definition of what success might look like. If these things that I'm doing go perfectly, how's it going to end up? What am I going to be doing? What am I really trying to accomplish with my life? Because that then lets you choose what you're going to do next. I want to walk on the moon. I decided when I was 9. Neil and Buzz are the coolest human beings ever. I want to walk on the moon. I'm 9 years old. What do I do next? And so I started reading about it and learning to scuba dive and join the Air Cadets and learn to fly and go to university. All of those things were trying to gather each of the skills that someday may let me do something that was my end life dream. And the question we all face is not what do I want to be doing in 30 years? It's the real hard question is, what should I do next? And to me, that's the real key of how you change yourself, is give yourself a long-term definition of how you want this to turn out so that it helps you choose the small things you need to deliberately whittle away and change about yourself. So that you can separate danger from fear. You can say, this is a risk worth taking. This is a risk not worth taking. This is something that's important to me. And it's amazing if you go through that mental process internally, where each of those little next steps can take you.
But the other incredibly dangerous thing is something only 200 people roughly have done, which is to walk in space. And you described that as the experience that trumps everything.
It is.
An overwhelmingly visual experience. And I'd just like you to somehow pass on to the audience here what that's actually like.
We don't go outside, like in the movies, Gravity, we don't go outside recreationally. And what was George Clooney doing out there? Flying around. It's like he and Sandra met while they were out on a spacewalk. It's dangerous to go outside, but sometimes you need human dexterity. It's things that it takes human creativity to go out and fix something or build something. So once in a while we accept the risk that we need to go outside. I was lucky enough to do 2 spacewalks and to take all the training, do all that thing, all the little next steps that get you to the point where now you can safely do that. The moment comes, you turn the hatch, you clunk it up out of place, and you pull yourself out into the universe. And suddenly, you're not on Mother Earth looking up, sort of like sitting in your mother's lap looking at something. You are in the universe with the world. It's an entirely different perspective. And we were coming across the Indian Ocean in the darkness, and I had all the lights shut off in my suits because I wanted my night vision to adapt, because I wanted to see Perth, and I wanted to pick up Adelaide and Melbourne and Sydney. I wanted to see the cities on the coast. But as soon as my eyes got adjusted, we drove into the Southern Lights. And we're going 5 miles a second. And the Southern Lights were rippling and pouring between my legs in all of the colors and 3 dimensions. And it was overwhelmingly beautiful. Just an amazing human experience. And this is a natural thing. This is just part of being a planet. This is just the energy from the sun and the upper atmosphere and the fluorescence, but it is just so unconsciously gorgeous. And you don't get that level of understanding without challenging yourself, without deciding that some risks are worth taking. And the most memorable, I guess, the most rewarding moment of my entire life was to have a chance to be one of the first human beings to go out into the universe and get a sense for what it's going to be like when we turn tail to Earth and leave as soon as we solve those problems.
Chris, thanks for giving us here a bit of a sense of that.
My wife and I have raised 3 kids, and I was amazed to watch that they developed the ability to walk way, way before they had the ability to do just about anything else. Before they could talk, before they had any common sense, evolution had given them the ability to go explore. It's necessary as a human being to be able to go explore, to grow as an individual. It's fundamental to all of us. It's absolutely necessary for us to develop. If you spend all of your life laying on your back in one location, you will not develop with any sort of capability. And there's nothing sacrosanct about space exploration. Our exploration has always been pretty much limited by the technologies that we've developed. And we only got to the South Pole 100 years ago because we were limited by technology. And we only started flying a little over 100 years ago. And we only went vertical into space 50 years ago. And that it is the exact same extension as our 3 kids learning to walk. It's just normal. So I think, to go to your question, there's nothing predestined about us having to leave Earth by any means. But I think leaving Earth as part of our experience of being a capable species is one of the things that's in fact, it's happened. We left Earth 15 years ago. We permanently started living on the space station in fall of 2000. We left Earth as a species half a generation ago. So that process is happening. And just like a kid learning to walk, the improved perspective and understanding, and therefore improved decision-making that comes from it is really important to our long-term survival. So Interstellar, it's a lot of fun to watch. It's crazy. It expands your mind. It's hard to figure it out. You can watch it 3 times and draw a different conclusion each time, which is great. But the reality of slowly using our technology to allow us to see something different, to allow us to learn something from it, that lends us build more technology to allow us to again follow that process. That's been going on since time began, and it's not going to stop. And then the real question is, how do each of us choose to participate in that, whether we have a space agency, whether we allow our citizens to become astronauts or not, how we organize ourselves. That's really the key decision-making.
We're just about out of time, so one last question to you. Would you have signed up, with all this, with all it entails, leaving your family behind, et cetera, would you have signed up for a mission to fly to Mars?
There are no missions going to Mars.
No, not currently.
No, there are no vehicles and no... and I think there's a misperception of what astronauts do. We don't go for rides. We help design, we make spaceflight possible. And we work with a huge team of people, and we help design the cockpit and understand the risks and all those things. And that's what is the interesting part of it, is the process and being involved in the process. And some of the stuff we're doing in the space station right now is answering those questions to go to Mars. I love that part of it. And eventually we'll figure out enough things that we can safely walk that far.
Ground control to Major Tom. Commencing countdown, engines on. Detach from station and may God's love be with you.
A couple of little sections from the video there. Just before we go to Zoe's question, is it true that your son pretty much twisted your arm to do that?
Yeah, that was just a father-son project. He sent me a note saying, "Hey, Dad, you really ought to record Oddity while you're up there." I was going, "Oddity? The astronaut dies in Oddity. Why would I?" So as a father, I said, "Hey, if you rewrite the words so the astronaut lives, I'll record the song." And it just kind of went from a father-son project into something, as you say, that hundreds of millions have seen. But to answer Zoe's question, You know, we've been living off the planet for 15 and a half years. As 15 leading nations of the world, we left Earth 15 and a half years ago. And when you first just start exploring, that's a temporary thing, but this is now almost cultural. This is a shift of our understanding of ourselves. It becomes a subculture of people living off the planet. And how do you share that? How do you know, we're an outpost away from the world, and how do you recognize that that transition is happening within us as a species? And you can talk about the graphs and the charts, and we're running 200 experiments on the station, and we set records for science utilization, and we were busy people. But at the same time, it's a magnificent human experience. And I just tried to use every means I could think of to try and share that experience with other people.
You've been quite philosophical about it, in fact. I think you called it an extension of the human consciousness, of human understanding. You're talking here about the video.
Well, I wish all of us, everybody here in the studio, and Zoe, if you could join us from Canberra, if we could all go around the world 100 times together, just to get on board a ship and actually get next to the window and see the reality of our planet. Enough times that you get over the jaw drop. Oh, I guess your jaw doesn't drop without gravity, but to get over the gobsmack wonder of it, and then actually start to see that we're all in this together, and to actually see the reality of our planet as one place, and not the hyperactive reporting that we get, the exaggerations of what we get every day. I think it's a really important perspective to have, and the more accurately people can see themselves, I think, the more likely we are to make a good decision together.
Josine DeBee has a question on precisely that subject. Let's go to her. Oh, sorry, she's up there. I beg your pardon, on the other side.
Hi. Yeah, building on that, when you're in space, do you feel more like a Canadian or more like a citizen of Earth? And how long does that feeling last once you've landed?
When you first get to space, it's actually kind of comical. You get to the window and you look for things that you know. And in fact, you feel this weird compulsion to grab the person next to you and go, hey, look, there's Paris. I was in Paris. That's Paris. I was in Paris. You know, and the other person goes, okay. But then the second time around, you go, yeah, hey, there's Paris. And then the third time around, and somewhere along the way, you start to realize that your particular parochial view of the world gets less and less important. And yeah, I'm a very proud member of the society that I grew up in. I'm a very proud Canadian. I was happy to command a spaceship with a Canadian flag on my shoulder, but I recognize that it's way more than that. And I had a crew from all around the world, and you go around the world 16 times a day, so you see all 7 billion people every single day. And somewhere along the way, when I was communicating with Twitter, I stopped referring to sort of other people from other places, and it all just sort of became a collective sense of us, sort of unconsciously, without me thinking about it, which I think is healthy, but it's not normal. And the more we can get that way, I think, whether on purpose or just by the things that we do, I think the better we'll be.
Just coming to the second part of Josine's question, which is, how does it feel when you come back again? We know that in the past, astronauts have come back, they've had religious epiphanies in space, and they've come back deeply changed. Some of them have come back and quite disturbed by being back, and the change they've found on Earth, have become alcoholics. I mean, how do you manage that, the transition back to Earth?
Yep. Can I have a drink? Justine, it's a good question. At first you feel awful. I mean, just physically. So your feelings and emotions that Tony's talking about are dominated by the physical changes that are, so you're nauseous and you can't balance and you faint when you stand up. But you get over that in a few weeks, and then in a few months you get your musculature back. It takes about 1.5 years to get your skeleton back. But the thing that lasts the longest, I think, is the psychological and the philosophical. And the people that you're speaking of that came back with an epiphany or a necessity to try and deal with it through, drugs or alcohol or whatever, that was really early on in the space program, when the getting to the moon was everything, and psychological preparation, understanding what this was going to mean to the people was tertiary at best. And we did a terrible job of Neil Armstrong was an astronaut for 8 years total. He flew in space 3 times. He walked on the moon. He rescued a Gemini that was spinning out of control. And then 8 years. And how does he fit that into the rest of his life? I don't know of any of the astronauts in the latter day who were shuttle astronauts who have had an epiphany. I think we're much more careful psychologically in letting people know what it's going to be like. Get them trying ready for it. And so that not only do they deal with it better afterwards, but I think they get more out of the experience. And they're maybe hopefully better at letting other people see into it just because it's not such an aberration out of their normal life.